Author's Introduction. Welcome to my nightmare. Growing up, I was what you'd call a monster kid, proudly raised on the Universal classics. I didn't just watch them, I studied them. Once I'd explored every corner of that cinematic universe, I moved on to the more risque Hammer films. Sure, the black and white Universals were wonderfully gothic, but who could resist the blood-red allure of the Hammers in terrifying Technicolor? In 4th grade, I became aware of horror's more modern monsters, namely Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Jason Voorhees. These were nothing like the Universals and Hammers. These were scary. I got the sense my parents were not going to let me rent these tapes anytime soon, but I simply had to see them, all of them. I spent that October scouring my local newspaper's television listings for these slasher flicks. I meticulously programmed my family's VCR to record at least a dozen of them. My introductions to the franchises like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. At this age, such films were beyond terrifying. I can honestly remember being grateful for the commercials just for the breaks in the tension. Watching a bloodless vampire bite wasn't that scary, but I'll never forget the first time I saw Freddy Krueger suck Johnny Depp into his bed, puree him, and spray his remains all over the room. That was the stuff nightmares are made of. By the following October, I was hooked on these new franchises and determined to dress up as Freddy for Halloween. I saved my allowance for what seemed like ages until I had enough to buy a mask and a glove. Some of you may remember this particular piece, which was based on the new Nightmare look. With its awkwardly cut eye holes just above Freddy's own bulging peepers, my toddler sister was deathly afraid of this mask, a visceral fear that I fully confess to having exploited regularly. I often left it in the doorway to my room to ensure she wouldn't mess with my stuff while I was at school. Years later, I would follow up this trauma by taking her to A Nightmare on Elm Street as her first big-screen R-rated movie. I'd like to think the experience was somehow therapeutic. I remained a monster kid at heart heading into my teenage years. By my remembrance, 2003 was a pretty great year for horror. There were so many franchises returning on screens, both big and small. We had new entries in ongoing series like Reanimator, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Final Destination, Puppet Master, Ju-On the Grudge, and Leprechaun. We were also introduced to House of a Thousand Corpses, Wrong Turn, Dead End, and Haute Tension. Best of all, on October the 15th, New Line finally unleashed the long-awaited Freddy vs. Jason in theaters. Who could ever believe this was finally happening? Freddy vs. Jason seemed far more like schoolyard conjecture than an actual production. How often had my friends and I speculated on which slasher might win in a fight to the death? For us, it was all about the particulars.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.